I need to tell someone this because I've been holding it in for 3 years. My name is Daniel. I'm 34 years old. And for 6 years, I was the perfect son-in-law. I fixed her leaking roof. I drove her to doctor appointments. I helped her move twice. I lent her money twice that she never paid back. I smiled at every family dinner even when she made comments about how I wasn't good enough for her daughter. I stayed quiet. I kept the peace. Because I loved my wife and her mother was part of the package. My wife Sarah and I met in college. She was the most beautiful, funniest person I'd ever met. Smart, driven, a little chaotic, but in a way that made life interesting. We got married at 28. Small wedding, her idea. And honestly, I didn't mind. Her mom Linda cried the whole ceremony. Happy tears, we thought. The first year of marriage was good, really good. Then Linda's husband left her, and everything changed. She started calling Sarah every single day, sometimes twice. Long calls, an hour, 2 hours. At first I said nothing. Her mom was going through something hard, of course she needed support. But then Linda started showing up, unannounced, at dinner time, on weekends. Once at 11 p.m. because she couldn't sleep and just wanted company. Sarah always let her in, always made tea, always sat with her for hours while I went to bed alone. I tried talking to Sarah about it. She said I was being selfish, that her mom needed her, that I should be more understanding. So I tried to be more understanding. I invited Linda to our vacations. I cooked for her when she came over. I watched her favorite TV shows with her even though I couldn't stand them. I thought if I made her feel welcome, things would balance out. They didn't. One night I came home from a brutal week at work. I was managing a major project, barely sleeping, running on coffee, and Linda was sitting at our kitchen table. Sarah had made her dinner. There was nothing left for me. I ordered pizza. I ate alone in the bedroom. That night I realized I had become a guest in my own home. I asked Sarah if we could set some boundaries. Just small ones. Maybe Linda calls before coming over. Maybe some weekends are just for us. Sarah looked at me like I'd said something monstrous. She's my mother, Daniel. I know. I'm your husband. She didn't speak to me for 2 days. A few months later, I found out Sarah had been telling Linda everything. Every argument we had, every complaint I made, every vulnerable thing I'd ever said to my wife in private. Linda knew it all. And Linda had been using it. Little comments at dinners. Little digs. Sarah mentioned you've been stressed at work. Must be hard feeling like a failure. Said with a smile. Always with a smile. I confronted Sarah. She said she just needed someone to talk to. That I was always working and she felt lonely. That hit me hard. Because she was right. I had been working a lot. But I was working to pay for our apartment, our life, the loans we'd taken. I was drowning and she felt lonely. And instead of coming to me, she went to her mother. I suggested couples therapy. She agreed, which surprised me. We went for 3 months. It actually helped. Sarah started to see the pattern. She started setting small limits with Linda. Things got better. I thought we'd turned a corner. Then Sarah got pregnant. I was so happy. I cried in the car on the way home from the clinic. I already loved that baby more than anything. And Linda went absolutely insane. She announced, without asking us, that she would be moving in after the baby was born. To help. She'd already told her friends. She'd already looked at which room she'd take. She showed up one day while I was at work and started measuring the guest room. I came home to find her there with a tape measure. I asked her to leave. She called me controlling. She called Sarah crying and said I'd attacked her. Sarah came home furious. That night was the worst fight of our marriage. Sarah said I was isolating her from her family, that I'd always hated her mother, that maybe she'd made a mistake. I slept on the couch. The next morning, I made a decision. Not out of anger, out of exhaustion. I wrote Sarah a letter. 4 pages. Everything I'd felt for 6 years. Every time I'd stayed quiet. Every sacrifice. Every moment I'd chosen her and her family over my own needs. I wrote it calmly, clearly, without blame. I left it on the kitchen table and went to stay at my brother's place. I told her I loved her. I told her I wanted our family, her, me, and our baby. But I could not continue living as a visitor in my own life. And I needed her to choose, not between me and her mother, but between the marriage we'd promised each other and the dynamic that had been quietly destroying us. She didn't call for 4 days. On the 5th day, she showed up at my brother's apartment. She'd been crying. She had the letter in her hand. She said, "I read this 5 times, and I called my therapist, and I talked to my mom. I waited. I'm so sorry, Daniel. I didn't see it. I really didn't see it." We stood in the doorway of my brother's apartment, and she cried, and I cried, and I held her for a long time. We went back home together that night. Linda did not move in. Things are not perfect. They never are. Linda still pushes boundaries sometimes. Sarah still struggles to say no to her. But now when it happens, Sarah looks at me and she remembers. And she chooses us. Our son was born 7 weeks later. I held him in that hospital room, and I thought about how close I came to losing all of this. Not because of Linda, not really, because I stayed quiet for too long. Don't do that. Don't be the person who keeps the peace until there's nothing left worth keeping. Am I the asshole for giving my wife an ultimatum? The comments were divided.
My father died on a Tuesday. I found out on Thursday. Not because no one could reach me, because no one tried. My name is James. I'm 41 years old, and I have a sister named Patricia who has hated me for reasons I still don't fully understand for most of my adult life. Let me give you the background. Growing up, Patricia was the favorite. Not in a subtle way, in a completely obvious, embarrassing way that everyone in the family acknowledged privately but never said out loud. She got the car for her 16th birthday. I got a card. She got her college paid for. I took out loans. When she got divorced at 32, my parents let her move back home for 2 years rent-free. When I went through a rough patch at 29 and asked if I could stay for 3 months, my father said, and I remember this word for word, "You're a man, James. Figure it out." I moved across the country, built a career in logistics, got married to a wonderful woman named Beth, had 2 kids, created a life I was genuinely proud of. I called my parents every few weeks, visited twice a year, sent gifts on birthdays, did everything a decent son was supposed to do despite the fact that the relationship was always slightly cold on their end. My mother passed 4 years ago. That was hard. Whatever distance existed between us, she was still my mother, and I grieved her properly. At the funeral, Patricia barely spoke to me. My father seemed more interested in managing Patricia's emotions than acknowledging mine. I drove back across the country alone and cried in a gas station parking lot in New Mexico. After that, my relationship with my father became phone calls every month or so, polite, surface level. He never asked about my kids by name. He asked about the children, the way you ask about someone's houseplants. Then he got sick. Patricia called me 6 months before he died to tell me it was serious. I offered to come visit. She said, "It's fine, I have it handled." I pushed. She said Dad didn't want to fuss. I sent a letter to my father directly, saying I wanted to come. He never responded. I trusted that Patricia was keeping me informed. She wasn't. He died on a Tuesday. Patricia called me on Thursday. When I asked why she waited 2 days, she said she'd been busy with arrangements. My father's funeral was on Saturday. She'd scheduled it knowing I was across the country and would need at minimum 3 days' notice to get a flight and arrange care for my kids. I made it. I sat in the back of the church because Patricia had reserved the front rows for immediate family, and apparently I didn't qualify despite being his son. I didn't cause a scene. I sat in the back. I said goodbye to my father from 20 rows away. Then came the will. My father left everything to Patricia. The house, the savings, the investments, everything. There was a single line about me. To my son James, I leave my watch as he always had everything he needed. I stood in the lawyer's office and read that line 3 times. I had everything I needed because nobody gave me anything, because I was told to figure it out, because I built my life from scratch while watching my sister get handed everything. And my reward for that was being written out as if I'd already been compensated. I didn't cry in that office. I went completely calm in the way you go calm when something is so painful your brain just steps outside for a moment. Patricia looked at me from across the table with an expression I can only describe as satisfaction. I took the watch. It was a nice watch. My father had worn it every day for 30 years. Whatever else was true, holding it felt like holding something real. I flew home. I sat with Beth in our kitchen that night and told her everything. She held my hand and didn't say much. She knew there were no right words. For a few weeks, I thought about contesting the will. A lawyer told me I had grounds. There were questions about my father's mental state in his final months, and Patricia had been his sole caretaker, which created certain legal complications. I could fight it. But then I thought about what fighting would actually cost. Not money, time, energy, years of my life spent in conflict with a woman who had dedicated herself to making me feel like an outsider in my own family. Years of my kids watching their father consumed by bitterness over something that ultimately couldn't be fixed. My father didn't forget to include me. He made a choice, and that choice told me everything about how he saw me that he'd never had the courage to say directly. Contesting the will wouldn't change that. It would just mean I'd spent years of my life trying to prove I deserved something from a man who'd already decided I didn't. I let it go. I kept the watch. I wear it sometimes, not every day, but on days when I need to remember that I built something real, without anyone handing it to me, on days when I need to remember that the way someone treats you is a reflection of them, not of your worth. My kids are 11 and 8 now. They're funny, kind, curious people. They have a father who shows up, who knows their names, who will never make them feel like guests in their own family. That's the inheritance I actually care about. Patricia reached out 8 months after the funeral. A brief email asking if I wanted some of Mom's old dishes that she was clearing out. No apology, no acknowledgement of anything. Just a transaction, I replied. No thank you. I have everything I need. I haven't heard from her since. Am I the asshole for cutting off my sister completely after our father's funeral? I flew home. I sat with Beth in our kitchen that night and told her everything. She held my hand and didn't say much. She knew there were no right words. For a few weeks, I thought about contesting the will. A lawyer told me I had grounds. There were questions about my father's mental state in his final months, and Patricia had been his sole caretaker, which created certain legal complications. I could fight it. But then I thought about what fighting would actually cost. Not money, time, energy, years of my life spent in conflict with a woman who had dedicated herself to making me feel like an outsider in my own family. Years of my kids watching their father consumed by bitterness over something that ultimately couldn't be fixed. My father didn't forget to include me. He made a choice, and that choice told me everything about how he saw me that he'd never had the courage to say directly. Contesting the will wouldn't change that. It would just mean I'd spent years of my life trying to prove I deserved something from a man who'd already decided I didn't. I let it go. I kept the watch. I wear it sometimes, not every day, but on days when I need to remember that I built something real, without anyone handing it to me, on days when I need to remember that the way someone treats you is a reflection of them, not of your worth. My kids are 11 and 8 now. They're funny, kind, curious people. They have a father who shows up, who knows their names, who will never make them feel like guests in their own family. That's the inheritance I actually care about. Patricia reached out 8 months after the funeral. A brief email asking if I wanted some of Mom's old dishes that she was clearing out. No apology, no acknowledgement of anything. Just a transaction, I replied. No thank you. I have everything I need. I haven't heard from her since. Am I the asshole for cutting off my sister completely after our father's funeral?
I've known Maya since we were 7 years old. 23 years of friendship. Sleepovers, heartbreaks, bad haircuts, worse boyfriends. She was the maid of honor at my wedding. I was the first person she called when she got engaged. So when she asked me to be her maid of honor, I said yes without hesitating for a single second. That was 18 months ago. And I need to talk about what happened between then and the wedding day, because I'm still processing it, and honestly, I think I deserve to say this out loud. It started small. Maya sent a mood board for bridesmaid dresses. Floor length, sage green, specific shade, specific silhouette. Fine. I found one that matched perfectly, sent her the link. She said it was close, but not right. Sent another. Almost. Sent 6 more over 3 weeks. Each time, not quite. The dress she finally approved cost $340, non-refundable. For a dress I will never wear again. She wanted a weekend trip. 3 nights, nice hotel, activities. split between 6 bridesmaids. My share came to $580. I was between jobs at the time. I'd just left a toxic workplace and was freelancing. I told Maya I could do maybe $200. She said, and I quote, "I really need my girls to show up for me on this." I paid the $580. The bridal shower was at her mom's house. I was in charge of decorating. Maya sent a Pinterest board with 47 pins. I spent 2 Saturdays and about $200 on decorations. On the day, she walked in, looked around, and said, "I thought there'd be more flowers." I smiled. I said nothing. 2 weeks before the wedding, she told me my speech was too funny and not emotional enough. I'd spent 3 weeks writing that speech. I rewrote it in 4 days. The night before the wedding, during the rehearsal dinner, Maya pulled me aside. She said she'd been thinking and she wanted her cousin to give the maid of honor speech instead. Her cousin who had been friends with her for longer. Her cousin who had done none of the planning, none of the organizing, none of the 18 months of work. I asked her why. She said her cousin was just a better speaker. I went to the bathroom and stood there for 5 minutes looking at myself in the mirror. I didn't cry. I was past crying. I was in that place beyond hurt where everything just goes very still and very clear. I went back out. I smiled through the dinner. I helped Maya into her dress the next morning. I held her bouquet. I stood beside her at the altar. Her cousin gave the speech. It was 4 minutes long and mentioned Maya's name 14 times. At the reception, Maya hugged me and said, "Thank you for everything. You're such a rock." A rock, not a person. A rock. We haven't spoken much since the wedding. She's texted a few times, normal life updates, nothing addressing any of it. Maybe she doesn't think there's anything to address. I've been asking myself for months whether I should say something. Whether real friendship means telling her how she made me feel. Or whether some people only show you who they are in the moments that matter most to them. And the wedding was hers, not ours. I don't have a clean answer. What I have is $1,100 less in my bank account, a $340 dress in a bag at the back of my closet, and a friendship that feels like a house I'm not sure I want to keep living in. Am I the asshole for considering ending a 23-year friendship over this?